Okay, everyone, we are recording, and welcome to the second online meeting of the chemistry faculty from our Washington State CTC system. And I think we also may have some folks from our neighboring states. And so welcome wherever you're joining us from. And right now we're going to kick us off with our wins. And so Awanthi is going to kick us off with a win from this week. Ready? Go.
Okay, so it's my win again is like, as I said earlier too, I am from Wenatchee Valley College, and we are in a little rural area where I get a lot of low income students who struggle with getting like internet and a computer that works and stuff like that. So I was able to find some labs that would work in offline situations, and I found some I found I have never done online teaching before, so I've used Panopto a couple of times, that's it. But I found a way that I didn't know that there was a way to record lectures so that they can download it and they can go somewhere else and then watch it leisurely, so they can go to a hotspot and download the videos and play it at their own pace. So that was a huge win for me. That was my win.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. Are there, and also I just want to say too, this is a really important equity consideration. And so I'm really grateful to you for modeling how we are equity minded during this time. So this is a really great way to kick off our meeting. Who else has a win they would like to share? And if you typed it into the chat and you want to speak it, that would be awesome. Otherwise, Lucas and I can skim through and share some wins. Anne Brackett, do you want to share what you wrote in the chat?
Sure. So our classes don't start until next quarter, and I had my Canvas course open. I've been teaching online for a couple of years, so I generally open my course a couple of weeks ahead of time for folks who want to get started early. And this past week has seen a lot more engagement from students in the week prior to the quarter starting, so I was pretty excited to have students to interact with this week.
Thanks, Anne. And I am just wondering really quickly, Jeff Stevens, I see that you found some lab simulations you could use for Chem 121. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Sure. So Charles Barrows, who's on the call today, searched out some websites for lab simulations, and one of those was EduWeb Labs, and they have a lot of lab simulations, and so we managed to find enough to fill out our M121 labs with those lab simulations, and many of them are very similar to the labs that we do in real life. So they're pretty well structured, and so I was pretty happy to get that in place.
That's awesome.
I found another one, Pivot Interactives is pretty good for the Chem 121.
Thank you. Who is that speaking?
Julie Nelson.
Oh, hi, Julie. Hello. We've exchanged a lot of emails. Thank you. It's nice to see you. Hello. I know Marie Dunn has her hand raised, and we are going to talk about how we're going to or a plan that Lucas Myers and I have developed for how we can share materials. So I'm just wondering if, before we move into that kind of segment with folks, is there any other wins that people would like to share, especially when you think about how fast it's been since last week? What else have people discovered or want to share or celebrate?
Hi, this is Suki Smaglik from Yakima Valley College, and I got here late, so maybe somebody said this already, but the enthusiasm and the support of the students has been pretty incredible this week.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Anne Brackett mentioned something similar, but I think it's always good to know that other people are experiencing excited students. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, so I would like to introduce Lucas Myers. Lucas is biology faculty, and he has been helping me kind of wrap my mind around the communities of practice for the biology specific discipline groups. And yesterday, actually, Lucas, I guess I'll just ask, do you want to just say a few words about yourself and your background before we go a little bit further?
Sure. I mean, I don't have to go super in depth, but I am a tenured biology faculty member at Lower Columbia College, and I know there's a few of my colleagues on here today I saw, and so I've been there for a while, and I've worked with Jen in a variety of faculty development areas for the last few years at the state board level, and so I'm just happy to be here and happy to help, and in any way possible. You guys are going to be far more knowledgeable in chemistry than I am, and so if I can help in any way in terms of organizing and so that resources are easier to access, that's kind of where I'm going to help facilitate this process. And we've been doing some good things with biology to kind of organize Canvas spaces and things so that people can drop in and find resources and get their courses made easier. And I think that's where Jen and I will be looking to talk with you, all of you today.
So we know obviously that labs are a high priority concern. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, so we'd like to devote a substantial portion of today's meeting to discussing how to best share resources so that nobody has to reinvent the wheel. But before we do that, are there any other challenges or lab specific challenges that folks would like to either voice verbally or type into the chat? So the question at hand is, what do you see as the most pressing challenges right now, either specific to labs or other than labs? Julie, thank you. Julie writes into the chat, one of her colleagues couldn't be here today, but he's having issues finding labs for Chem 131. Julie, thank you so much. Lucas and I have started to kind of identify at least one resource. Oh, and someone else is writing Chem 131. Okay, this is great. What else? Jeff, developing organic chemistry labs. Yes, absolutely. And Jeff, I have been thinking about your request for an OChem specific chemistry shell, and Canvas shell. And I actually have a suggestion for this that we'll get to in a little bit. So Amanda is writing Chem 133 labs are challenging. Yes, and Katie writes, for me, it's just the amount of time it takes to develop the labs. I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed. Yes, Katie, we have a proposal for this that I hope will be useful. So Sumita writes, I'd like to be part of the OChem lab development effort. Great, thank you, thank you. Awanthi writes that she agrees with Katie about the amount of time and feeling overwhelmed. Marie, time, and yes, there's so much to do. Sue, Chem 163 labs, the simulations are not rigorous enough. Okay, that's good to know too. And Suki, would you be willing to share a little bit about Beyond Labs?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, just
That's right.
Surprise.
And I guess I have to put an adult picture on my page anyway, but so let me just put my video on. So our lab assistant actually, she was helping our organic chemistry instructor try to find something. It's created by a group called Simulation Curriculum, and I've used their Layered Earth for quite a few years teaching geology and the Starry Night software for teaching astronomy. So I was surprised I didn't know about it for chemistry. But they have all the labs that they have are a virtual reality classroom lab bench. And then they have worksheets that specifically lead the students button by button as to what they should do to create their lab experience. They have a lab notebook and an answer sheet that the students can either print out and write on, or Some of us are trying to create some Canvas quizzes so they can just put their answers into that for ease of grading. We have only just assigned them, so we don't know how they're working, but those of us who have played with them are really pretty impressed with the fact that we don't have to spend that extra time to say, okay, here's a virtual lab, what are we going to do with it? They've already come up with a number of different lab scenarios and exercises. So from my experience, I'm teaching 162 this quarter, and we're starting out with heat of combustion labs, and there's 3 of them: chicken fat and sugar and TNT. So we combine those 3 exercises into one lab for the students, and all we had to do was give them directions and the code in Canvas, and then they would just get in. So we're really crossing our fingers because it looks good, but and that said, I have not seen the organic chemistry side of it. They have a specific organic chemistry slot, and the organic chemistry instructor is pretty impressed and happy with it. Doesn't seem like it will work for 131. That's still a struggle here, but for the other organic labs, it seems like it would be a good thing to use. So we're
Hey, Suki, do you mind not unmuting yourself for 1 minute? Can I keep you in the hot seat for just a few more questions?
Sure.
So one person is saying that one person would like to know if there's a cost, and there's a couple comments about challenges to installing it, like it's crashing people's computers. And I guess I was just wondering if you could speak to some of those issues or questions.
Sure. There is a cost. It's $25 per seat, and we got permission to use the lab fees that the students already paid because we're not going to be buying supplies. So our administration has been supportive of that. So we're not even asking the students to pay the $25, which is really a deal anyway, but since they've paid about that for their lab fees. We did have some problems with getting it to load properly. It's never crashed my system. I don't know that it's crashed any other people's, but some of their ins and out keys are a little bit like, how do I get out of this? Oh, there's a little exit button here that I didn't see. So that took a little getting used to, but I haven't heard anything yet from it crashing computers. Did I answer all the questions? I can't remember.
You did a great job. You did a great job. Thank you so much. And I think Carl Bailey has a comment about Beyond Labs being pretty good for OChem. And so Suki, thank you. And Carl, do you want to speak to Beyond Labs for OChem?
Not really. I mean, check it out. I do agree.
Are you sure?
It's a bit buggy, but I mean, for third term OChem, they can go through about 15, 20 reactions. Like I said, there's a virtual round bottom flask. They can inject solutions. They can stir in heat in different orders. It looks pretty robust. And then there's added spectroscopy. So for a third term organic lab, I think my students would probably do okay with that. I'd probably supplement it with some kind of roadmap problems, mechanisms, full spectroscopy types of unknowns kind of thing. So I think you could kind of get through third term organic pretty well.
Carl, thank you so much. And I think one thing that I would like to sort of propose to folks is, as we sort of discuss the merits, the pros and cons of these, of things like Beyond Labs, that these conversations are, sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought, and too many ideas came out all at the same time. So what I'd like to go back to is, sorry, I'm just gonna start a little bit of a different direction. So one thing that Sarah and another person talked about here is also about how do we adapt lectures and figure out how to make short concept videos rather than lengthy lectures. And I am gonna post something to the chat. The ACUE has a really great short module development process. It's like a very short webinar series that talks a little bit about how to create effective micro lectures. And as we move forward, and as Lucas and I talk a little bit today about how we might kind of think about moving this group forward as a collective. One thing I would like to propose is that once we have some sort of conceptual framework, that people could share that out. Like one person could record one mini lecture, another person could record another mini lecture, so that we're sort of crowdsourcing the work. And so again, just trying to kind of spread the work around rather than having everybody recreate the wheel. So I think maybe one thing, Lucas, could you talk a little bit about what you proposed to the A&P group, and because and just maybe, I think you can say it more succinctly and coherently than me.
Yeah. So what we talked about in A&P group, and we're continuing to look at for a lot of biology groups, is creating a Canvas space where we can, as faculty, kind of work together to create a good working, I don't want to say repository because that always sounds like a place you just go dump stuff that you're never going to use, but a Canvas space where there's actually created activities or resources that we can go to and use, and they're put in there in a way that's organized and effective, just like we would do for our classrooms. And I think that also helps create good design principles. And so the idea is that, if we use this as an example today, looking at like Chem 131, if we were to have a Canvas space that had a module for Chem 131, and we were to able to identify maybe what are the 4 or 5 key lab things that you want them to be able to do this quarter. And then we were able to have people either, one, you already have it, or two, you create that activity for that key.
Hey, Lucas, I think you've cut out just a smidgen. I don't know if did other people lose Lucas's audio?
Right.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So I'll just kind of re-summarize. In looking at Canvas space to use it as a resource, if we were to look at Chem 131, the idea would be, how do we find what are maybe 5 or 6 concepts or skills that you need them to know laboratory wise? We can look at the learning outcomes. And I don't know if those are, I looked at ours at LCC for Chem 131, but I haven't looked at every institution or how similar those are across. I'm sure they're somewhat similar across the board. And so you could come up with 4 or 5 concepts or skills that they need to know in lab. We could set that up in an organized way in Canvas, and then have 1 or 2 people or groups of people that are able to create that activity, or maybe they already have one that can be put in there so that people can easily access it and dump it into their course. And it's an easy way for us to work as a community of practice to develop those activities. And the same thing can be done for lectures. For A&P, the way I've done it is I've organized it for the whole 2 quarters by systems, and we broke it down into like lab activities, lab resources or images, simulation exercises, so that the A&P instructors can put their things they're creating or the things they use into the organizational tools within the modules, so that if I go in there and look for something, I can look right, okay, Chem 131. Oh, here's a simulation exercise and here's the topic. I can look at it, figure out if it works, and dump it into my course. And I think that'd be a really useful tool, one, for us to share the effort in creating things, but also the ability to find resources quickly versus we know how much time it takes to go on Google and search for stuff and look at it and decide if it's good or not. Instead, we could trust each other and work with each other in finding useful tools and creating useful assignments or activities that can be used this quarter and beyond, because we know that, one, we don't know what it's going to be like this summer and the fall, and 2, we know that this is going to cause some shifting in education in general. And so that's something we have to kind of think about, is sustainability and what we can do online.
So Marie is writing in, yes, this is what we need. And I just want to kind of thank you, Marie. And I guess I'd like to hear, yesterday when we proposed the idea to the A&P group, they had some modifications or suggestions. And so I guess I'm just wondering how people feel about this as a way to move forward in a way that, so that everyone isn't reinventing the wheel, and also so we can start to share resources. And obviously Lucas and I are not chemists. So,
Yeah.
so for A&P, it's the 5 systems for 241 and 242. And so I'm just wondering if people, like obviously, so Chem 131 is emerging as kind of a hot spot. The biologists decided that they wanted to have kind of a grouping for bio ampersand 160. They want to have a grouping for major and majors biology, plant and animal. So I guess I'm just wondering if people feel like there's some kind of organizing principle for artifacts in the Canvas shell, so that it's not, as Marie points out down here, not a huge database of maybe you can do something with this. So Carl is asking about case studies for Chem 131 centered around healthcare applications. Carl, that seems like a great suggestion. Yeah, people are writing, okay, people are writing in, good idea. So I guess what I'd like to do is maybe show people the Canvas shell, like, and I guess I'll just ask to all of you, I invited everybody who I had on my chemistry list to the Canvas shell. And so I am hoping that this is the place where we can share things. But right now the Canvas shell just has like one Word doc, or it's a Google Doc with a bunch of stuff in it. And so I'm wondering if we can, like, what's a way that it makes sense to share resources for this group? And I'll share I'll get into the Canvas shell.
One thing that people have been pointing out is the Canvas Commons is a good place to put things. And then you just type in what course. And if we already have a spot where we can find things, why not?
Yes. So are you saying that people would just go look in Canvas Commons, or would we curate it and then add links? So this is the chemistry community of practice. This is the Canvas shell for, and so I've put in general COVID-19 teaching resources, a list of the emails, a list. So here's our running list of chemistry resources. But my concern about this is that it's just, we've got some really great stuff in it, but again, I feel like, as Marie pointed out, it's kind of a, maybe you could do something with this. And so I'm just wondering if again, if we had modules for different courses, then people could link directly to the Canvas Commons. But it could be organized in some way for people who are looking for specific things. So Alyssa is saying that we could tag items in Canvas Commons and the resource links could go into the Canvas shells. Charlie asked to take Marie's point and build on Lucas's approach. Perhaps what we really want is outcomes, activities, resources, and then publishable plug and play assignments. Charlie, that seems like a great suggestion.
Yeah, and I think that's an approach. I think where most of these groups are going to end up is, how do we have something, one, in those Canvas shells, but maybe it gets put into Canvas Commons, or you can copy it right out of that Canvas shell into your course. The one thing with the Canvas shell that adds benefit versus Commons is you don't have to download it into your course to explore it to its full extent. We could have it, people could build something and put it right into that shell, and you'll be able to actually see it, look at it. Multiple people could suggest edits versus Commons. Sometimes you're getting a review and then downloading it, and it's still a giant repository, and so you're having to sift through stuff. I think the benefit with this is having a bunch of well-respected peers develop this work and trust each other and be able to just to pull it in and build on it. And yeah, Canvas Commons has the preview. You just don't necessarily have it's just a little different than looking at it in the Canvas shell.
So looking through the chat, I'm seeing that a lot of people are kind of posting what they're doing. Oh, okay. So Wendy, I see you wrote, I'm wondering if we should also have a subgrouping for lab platforms. So Smart Sparrow, for example, under each course. I think that's a great idea. Or Katie is writing, I think a module for each course with people uploading assignments who are willing to share would be a great start. Okay, so this is very helpful for me. And so it's 11:30, and so I guess I'm just wondering, I want to be sure that I'm respectful of what the group would like to do and what would be most useful for the group. So I'm wondering if we want to spend more time talking about how we might share resources. I guess maybe Marie, I'll turn to you. Do you think that this addresses the need that you voiced earlier on? Does this sound like a good plan to you?
Yes, I share those concerns about, I'm a bit oversaturated with the large lists of places to go to look for things and need a system of organization. And where we're at right now is that I do have some lab activities that are, I think, ready to go. And I have others that are in the planning stages and others that I just have a topic and a great big question mark about what am I going to do with that area.
Yes, yes, the big question mark is prevalent. Can I ask you a quick question? So Sue Critchlow is saying that for Gen Chem, we need organization by topic as quarters vary from school to school. And again, Lucas and I are not content experts. And so what we could really use everyone's help with right now is, what are the topics that we could sort of organize documents and our resources around? Okay.
And that could be done by course, or we could do it as topics, depending on what you guys would need in the Canvas shell.
And I guess too, and again, this is me being a non-STEM person. So Wendy, I see you saying it's a long list. And I think my question to this group, again, as somebody who is not a STEM expert, but I do have a lot of experience with outcomes and assessment. So what are there 5 or 6 kind of core concepts that you really want students to know and be able to do that kind of encapsulate the long list of content? Does that make sense? Like, Julie, you're shaking your head. Tell me what's up. Tell me what I don't know, please. Oh, you're muted.
There's a lot more than 5 or 6 concepts. I don't teach the Gen Chem, Tony Molinaro does, but I could ask him what is the basic concepts that they cover in the Gen Chem series. So then that way you can provide the basic list and what goes under each topic.
Yeah, I think it's important to really think about, one, you're not going to be able to make, even if you had all the time, a whole year to plan, it's not going to be perfect in your eyes, generally, when you're creating an online class. And then 2, you're doing this under crunch time with maybe no planning. So the idea is we can continue to build and develop and improve. And a lot of you probably already have great resources, as you've talked about, in your current Canvas shells for face-to-face classes and all sorts of things. So the idea is, how do we simplify it to make it bite chunk, just like we would do for a student, at least to get it moving and get it started. Because we all know that to try to simplify, we hang on to our content in the sciences, and I understand that completely. And so it's, how do we bite chunk it so that we can develop things to make it useful for people to start building this spring, and then as we build, we can start adding to that and make it more robust as needed. But I don't think we want to list like 15 things, 15 different modules in Canvas, because then it just, you create that overwhelming repository again. So I think it's, how do we really bite chunk it to help all of you, to help each other. That's kind of the idea. And so trying to figure out a way to find what the most important things are that maybe you're lacking or that you need help building this spring.
So I just want to say that Carl has a comment that, and Carl, I'm hoping you might speak to this, and then also Mike Kelly has some good points, and Wendy, I think you have a good point too. So I'm just wondering if, Carl, if you could speak, if I could put you on the spot in the hot seat, and then Michael, and then Wendy.
Well, I mean, I'm seeing in the discussion that people are agreeing. I mean, 6 labs should be plenty for a term, 4 to 6, whatever number works. I mean, you have to create this, which is going to take you a lot of time. You have to manage this and support students through this. So I think, doing more with less is kind of our approach this spring, just to get through the spring. So again, find those key outcomes that you want, find some key experiences you think students should have, and then create those assignments around that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think you said better what I was trying to say, so I really appreciate that. And I just put a little note in the chat that it seems like there might be consensus that 4 to 6 labs is reasonable, and really focusing on key outcomes, key experiences. Actually, Wendy, I think this speaks to what you were talking about. Wendy, do you want to add anything?
I guess the only thing I'd like to add is one thing I'm struggling with is trying to figure out how much work is enough for the students and how much is so much that it's overwhelming to them. So I do appreciate, 4 to 6 labs on top of learning all the material on their own for just the course content. I'm thinking 4 to 6 labs might be just enough, but it all depends on how complicated you make the lab. But I agree, starting with the labs might be the best place for all of us. I think taking our course content and translating that to online material is probably more straightforward than taking the labs and converting them. Sounds like that's where we can all use the most help.
Also, you win for best Zoom background, even though I have a feeling that's not a Zoom background. Thanks, Wendy. Michael Kelly, did you want to add anything? Maybe, so I'll read what you wrote into the chat. Writing down, I think it might be most useful to sort by class, and then we can search similar classes for subjects that might cover that others don't. So I just wanted to highlight that. So Ted Baldwin writes, our goal is 7, but I think 6 would be fine. And yeah, and I guess too, just Wendy raised, I think, a really important question, and I just typed it into the chat. How much is too much and what's enough? And I just wonder, are there other folks who have insights or questions or challenges to share around how much is enough or what's too much?
I think what a lot of people will realize is if you haven't taught online, if this is new, you'll find that students generally are going to spend more time online than they did in your face-to-face class most of the time, whether that be technical issues or how hard the labs are or whatever they are. From my experience of teaching cell biology to anatomy physiology online, students spend more time online working in an online class than they would in a normal seat time of a face-to-face class. And so that's just something to consider, and just design your class in a way to meet your outcomes the best you can. And it's going to take more time, but I think that's a good thing to weigh on your mind with the added stress and things that they're going to have to deal with this summer. Kids at home, all those things are items that we talked about in some other webinars and practices communities of practice Jen and I have been in, is the fact that a lot of us, as well as students, are going to have people coming into their rooms, kids that need fed, kids that need homeschool, all those things. And that's going to have a huge factor on how much work can be done. That doesn't mean we don't want to teach what we need to teach, but that's just, I think Wendy brings up a really important concept and topic that needs to be thought about in depth while you're designing that class for sure. And then let me look at the chat here. Suki had a great point that and it brings up another kind of idea that, like, you don't have to design an online class the same way a traditional class is. You can still have all those things. You don't have to have lecture and lab separate. Everything can mold together. And so that's another way to look at it. She said, since usually do good since usually she does guided inquiry teaching in class, I'm using some lab activities as learning experiences rather than lectures. So I have 12 labs set up, but I've decreased the amount of lecture and straight homework. So she's just designed it in a way where everything's about the lab and the content together. And so there's different ways to design these online classes. Don't feel like you have to have a whole separate lecture set up and a whole separate lab set up. Stuff can mold together, and actually it creates an environment where it's even better, because now you don't have that lecture and lab separation. You can mold everything together the way you want it, that you can't do when you have 48 students in a classroom and then 20 in the lab later on. So it's actually a chance to do some of the things that you'd want to do in a traditional setting. So Suki, thank you for putting that in the chat.
I also just wanted to highlight Marie talking about doing frequent check-ins with students to find out what their experience is looking like. I just have to say, after having taught online for many years, that I think this is a good practice for face-to-face and for online. Just checking in, you know, and students will be honest with you. Like I mean, at least in my experience, students have been honest with me about like, this is too much work, or you're not giving us enough work. You could challenge us more. And so again, I just think, Marie, that's such a good point to just keep asking students. And I do feel like from an outcomes assessment perspective, Wendy, taking into account your notion about, what you wrote about not being cognizant of your own grading load, as English faculty, you know, like we have so much time is poured into assessment. And I do want to say, if I could give you any advice, less is more. Less is more, and having fewer assignments where students get more feedback and more formative assessment, I think is probably the way to go. And Lucas, I think you and Bryce Battisti, who have been teaching online STEM for a long time, you both have kind of continued to scale back. Is that right?
Yeah, it's easy to get over robust, and so everybody's overworked in terms of the grading, the content, and it becomes less quality, honestly. And so scaling those things back and making more rich experiences online with good feedback and community and experience has been way more valuable in my online classes than when I first started teaching online.
We really, at the state board, and I feel like I can speak for our deputy director, Carly, who just sent all of us an email saying that overwork should not be the new norm. And that this is not sustainable. Like the way that the state board staff has been sort of overworking, she was like, it's just not sustainable. And so I also want to let all of you know, especially from conversations I've been having with faculty around the state, keeping your health is imperative. So also don't design something in the name of rigor that's going to kill you, if I could just throw that in there. Michael is asking Charlie from Cascadia. Cascadia is dropped from 9 labs to 7, and then giving students the top 6 scores of those 7 to give students flexibility. And Charlie, Michael is asking, which 162 labs are you doing and which are you dropping? Are you using a particular simulation platform? Do you want to take the mic?
Sure, yeah. We are dropping the synthesis lab because we didn't really feel like there was a good way to make that happen on short notice. We're using sort of a mix of online platforms for now, so we're kind of piecing it together on the fly, as the rest of you seem to be doing as well. So the first lab is molecular models, and we developed a PhET simulation. I think I've already sent that out to a couple of you, and would be happy to share that on a Canvas shell if you want. And like Jeff Stevens mentioned earlier, we're looking into EduWeb labs for some of them, although I don't think we've actually adopted it quite yet. Still exploring that. And some of the later labs actually lucky in that we still have photos and videos left over from snow closures last year. And so we are going to use our original labs with very few modifications, basically just showing the photos of each step and asking the students to complete those reports. I'm trying to remember what the other 2 are that we dropped, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will type it in the chat when I figure that out.
Yeah, and Charlie, would you consider uploading just kind of the basics of like what you're doing at Cascadia into the Canvas shell.
Sure.
I think that would be really useful. And I would like it if the Canvas shell could be a shared resource for folks beyond posting things into the chat. So Charlie, thank you so much for all the hard work and thinking the Cascadia faculty are doing into this, and thanks for being willing to share that forward.
Sure. Yeah. To be clear, this was not all me. I'm just the only one from 162 who's here right now. But there's a bunch of us working on it.
Well, yeah, and again, your hard work is appreciated. So I think Marie, Marie and I think there's a few other people who have sort of given ideas for like how the Canvas shell should be organized. And I'm just wondering if, Lucas, do you think we have enough information to move forward with a new organization for the Canvas shell?
Yeah, I think Erin Gibbons might have had a comment. I saw her raise her hand. I'm not sure if it was a hand raise or not, but I think Erin.
Yeah, actually, somebody wrote early on that it would be nice if they were organized by what source type. Like if there was one module for Beyond Labs and what people are doing there, and one in particular, I'm interested in pivot interactives. I haven't really dug deep into it, but it seems like the kind of approach that I'm interested. So I was really excited to see if there's a module like that. And then as we develop stuff, like I could say, okay, this is how I'm using it in conjunction with this lab manual assignment, and then it's a complete package. So that would be really cool for me because a lot of it, like you have to see what it does, and then you have to think about how it integrates to what you already do, and then put it together. And then you have to give students this really clear directive of how everything's integrated and what they need to do. And I'm just overwhelmed by that. So I was really interested in that by source type, so I could see what has been done and implemented in full for future use. So that's my input. That would be my preference rather than by course, because I feel like I can adapt things to different outcome levels, but it's harder to find something that's a complete package that works well.
So sorry, please don't unmute yourself yet. So sorry. So just so I can get it for myself. So it's source type, but what people have done by source type that's more fully fleshed out and working?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be a place where I would both come back and update what I've done.
Okay.
My finished work product with respect to that source. Because then if you're using a mix of PhET simulations and Beyond Labs, then you could go look for the different things. You could put them into the different source type, and then it's more of a complete module. And particularly for summer or fall, that would allow us to sort of capitalize on each other's investment in those things.
So Marie is writing into the chat, for example, weak acid base titration use platform with accompanying documentation.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Could
like
everyone...
I want to do titrations, but I have to see how it works and work through it, and then I have to rewrite something for it,
So how Marie just modeled examples, can people write things like that into the chat, and then Lucas and I can create the place for it to live? Because I think we just want it to be useful for you guys, and if it's not the way the A&P did it, no worries.
Nope.
Oh, Lucas says no.
Yeah, no. I mean, we doesn't need to be consistent to what any other group's doing. It just needs to be useful and organized in a way that works for chemistry. So that's organization that makes it easy for all of you is what we want.
Yeah, this is great. So, okay, so Armando is writing in. Armando, do you want to speak to this point, or do you want me to read it?
Oh.
Hi.
I was hitting the wrong unmute button. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a frog going. I think it's just the idea that having something that's going to be working is great. So whoever's got the energy to really start it going, let's go with their favorite method, but also create some separate indices. If anybody remembers the Biostein index, everything was organized by functional group and reactivity. Now everything's just Google searchable. but I'm happy to help maintain an index of basically a sortable spreadsheet with the different approaches to organizing things.
What? A sortable spreadsheet? Oh my God, that would be amazing. I love that idea. That's great. That might be, thank you for offering. I would really appreciate that. Because again, like I do everything in Word documents. So, so I was like, a spreadsheet? What? That's amazing. Carl says, please add the spreadsheet. So Armando, do you have capacity to just take a stab at a mock-up for it? Or do you think you could just get it started and then people could start adding to it?
Well, I think that it really is a series of columns with as content gets created, then we just have classification columns, and you turn on the filter feature in the spreadsheet. So it shouldn't be complex, but I think we need some data before we can really see how it's going to look.
Okay, so maybe as people upload things to the Canvas shell, then maybe you could take maybe a stab at organizing it into a spreadsheet?
Happily.
Okay, so it's 11:47, and okay, and Tomaso is asking, could we do a Google Sheet so we could all add to it? Armando, does that seem reasonable to do it as a Google Sheet?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Tommaso, we will do it as a Google Sheet, and people are saying that they love this idea. And so I think what that means then, and Armando, tell me if I'm understanding you correctly, what this means then is that people should be uploading stuff to the Canvas shell so that we have kind of a central place for it.
I'm going to defer to other people. I'm not super great with the ins and outs of importing in Canvas, so but probably yes.
Okay, or if folks want to send it to me directly and say, Jen, I'd like this to be added to the spreadsheet, I can also do it that way. But I think right now for me, because I'm not a content expert, I think I would probably need folks to say, I think this is worth sharing to places, whether people want to upload it to the Canvas shell or people want to email it to me directly, or another solution. So yeah, go ahead.
The one thing I would see is that Lucas was talking about how having it in the Canvas shell makes it a lot easier to view and look at. Mm-hmm. So that might be a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think it could be both and, like because the Canvas shell is open, people can see what's in it. And so I think people can upload things to Canvas or include links. And like, I think as long as Lucas and I have access to whatever the thing is, I think we can help. Charlie Barrows is saying, I'll upload our complete 162 lab plan. Oh, Charlie, thank you. The gist is that the first 3 experiments are ready to go for online deployment. The remaining labs are all being adapted from in-house pictures, videos, and are probably less sharing ready for outside. Happy to share the first 3, molecular models, gas laws, and conductance. Charlie, thank you. That's awesome. Marie also has a really good suggestion. Marie, do you want to voice this?
Unmute. Okay. I was just thinking that as we're thinking about how to organize and collate and where to put it, that maybe the simplest thing to start putting things out there, it won't be a long-term solution, but to just start a discussion thread about what do you have that you can share now, and then people could just respond, this is what I'm doing, and put an upload, and then we can worry about how we're going to sort it and create all this for long-term use as we go. But we kind of need things quickly, so right. I'm willing to do a little bit of sifting of things that people think that they are. And I also just wanted to say, I hope that people will feel free to share things that aren't share ready, because that's how everything is.
Marie, I just love you so much. And yes. So I guess what I'm wondering, so I love all these ideas. And so I think the action item for this group and the 75 to 80 people who are on our list, what do you have that you can share right now? And we will ask you to post it as a discussion thread, and then we can sort of organize it and sort it later. But for right now, then we have at least, we have access to the things that people think are ready to share. And Marie, I want to just reinforce what you just said. Done is better than perfect. And Lucas's wonderful colleague, Katrina Fuller, has been teaching online for a super long time, and people were dying for her micro stuff. And she and I had a long talk about this because she was like, it's not ready. I don't want to post it. And I was like, Katrina, please post it. Oh my gosh, people are dying. Just post it. And so she did, is the end of that story. So again, even if you feel like things aren't necessarily ready to share, even just the generative seeds, I think, will really help people. So Marie, thank you for saying that.
Hey, Jen,
Yeah.
something we can do too that I think will make it easier is as they create discussions over, I'll still make some modules that are course specific modules in the Canvas space so that then we can organize the discussions or the Google Sheets or whatever they have in those courses so they're easy to access when someone logs into versus trying to scroll through a bunch of discussions. We can put those discussions in course specific modules so they can go right to them and add to them.
That would be awesome, Lucas. Thank you. So it's 11:52, and I know folks are, Aaron Gibbons just wrote to me and said, I sent you an email with my ready to share item. Aaron, thank you. That is awesome. Yay. Oh, my hand's like disappearing. I have no hand. So what else, anything else for the good of the order? Is there anything else before we close for today that people would really like to, either a challenge or a question? So Wendy is asking, can you send an email when you have the modules set up? And Wendy, I think, Lucas, we're uploading modules right now. Oh, I see. Okay. So yes, Wendy, we will send you an email. It just took me a second to process that. Yes.
I can have them done in like 10 minutes. If you guys just want to put in the chat the specific courses that you want modules for, if I just want to put Gen Chem, OChem, and then we could do like Chem 131. And do we also want Chem 110, or would those, just put in the chat which courses we need a module for, and I'd be happy to make those in a matter of minutes.
Okay, so Wendy says Gen Chem. And I know obviously OChem and Chem 131. What else? Okay, GOB, Chem 121.
21, yeah.
Okay. Can I just ask one question, just if folks could edify me for 1 minute? What is GOB?
That is general organic and biochem. So it's an intro or survey course.
Okay.
For like health science majors.
Thank you so much. I am learning a lot. I'm going to be a great dean someday. I'm going to know all the things. I will rule the world. Just kidding. Okay. I can't believe we're recording this. I'm sorry. I just haven't had enough coffee today. Anything else? And also thanks to folks who are still typing in. Okay. Anything else? All right. Oh, Michael says to Sue, I'd love that data if you'd like to share it. And Chris would like to know if he can get the acid-base data. I have the rest of the activity. All right. Lucas, any final thoughts?
No, appreciate everybody's work today. This was really good. I love seeing faculty and people in general work together. So well done.
Yeah, me too. And thanks everyone for being so willing to step into the void. And I know today's meeting might have been a little messy as we just sort of clarify our thinking, but I think moving forward, we're going to have a really robust base to build off of. My final question is, do folks want to have a meeting next week? Like another 1 week check-in, or would you prefer to just communicate over the Canvas shell? Like what? So I guess maybe if people could type in, if you would like another meeting next week, yes. If you feel like, nah, that's fine, just write no, my feelings won't be hurt. I'll just cry myself to sleep later. Okay. All right, so people would like to meet. Okay. And is this day and time workable for folks? Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. I really appreciate you making the time out of your busy schedules to make time for this. And it is super exciting to be able to work like this with all of you. Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.